Hi everyone, I'm Rhonda and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. Today I am going over all the books that I read in January. Now this is my very first wrap up of 2025 and I attempted to read 15 books, which I am very happy about. Sadly, I only finished 13 books, which means I did DNF 2 books. I don't like DNFing books, you guys know it, but I've made it my mission this year to DNF more books if I'm not enjoying those books. My average Goodreads rating was 3.46, which is about average for me. I did read a couple of 2-star books. I have some 3 and 4 stars, but I do have one 5-star read, and I'm gonna say it right now, but I think that book is definitely gonna make my top 10 of 2025 of the best books I've read this year. It was so good. I cannot wait to start talking about that one. I also read quite the variety of books. I read some adult romances. I read a couple of YA mystery thrillers. I read I think one YA fantasy romance. I read a couple of adult mystery thrillers. I read 2 fantasy romances of the adult genre. And then I read a few general fiction or women's fiction. And then I did attempt to read 1 historical fiction. So not too bad in terms of the different genres I read. I'm always excited when I can read different genres and not get pigeonholed into reading just one genre. And then in regards to my January TBR, you guys may have seen this video where I picked the books I was going to read for January. Out of the 7 books that I picked out, I managed to read 6 books. I'm very happy about that. The only book I did not get to was Beartown by Frederick Bachman, but I'm just going to add that to this month's TBR and hopefully I can get to that this year. But before we get into the 13 books I did finish, let's talk about the 2 books I DNF'd, and I'm very sad about it. I was really looking forward to these books, and these are the books that just had my name written all over them. I thought I would really love these and I could not get into them. First off, let's start with This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub. This one is it's more like a general fiction, but it has time travel and magical realism. This is about a woman whose dad is sadly, he's dying, and she time travels to her 16th birthday where her dad is healthy. And that's essentially what this book is about. I got, I think, only 70 pages into it, and the writing, it was driving me a little crazy, sadly. I don't like talking about writing, but I could not get into the writing. This one was just kind of a rambling mess. She was talking about things that really had no point in I didn't understand the point of it. So sadly, that's why I did DNF this book. If you finished this book and you loved it, let me know in the comments if I should give this another chance. I don't know if maybe my frame of mind was not where it needed to be to get started on this book, but I just, again, I could not get into it, and I want to know if this is a book I need to give a second chance to, but for now, it is a DNF. And then the other book that I DNF'd, I'm super bummed about because I could not wait to get to this book, and that is the historical fiction, The Only Woman in the Room by Marie Benedict. I actually got through half of this book, and again, the writing was really bugging me. I don't know if this was her debut novel or I don't know, but the writing was very wooden. I feel like I was reading a biography where the author was attempting to give a little depth to the character, but it just never got there. It's just a very wooden, surface level writing. This one is about a true story. It's about Hedy Lamarr, who was a very famous actress in the 40s. She was coined with the name, the most beautiful woman in the world. But she was also more than just an actress and a pretty face. She was actually an inventor. She was very smart, and she invented something that we all use every single day, and that is something called frequency hopping. And we use that in Wi-Fi and in Bluetooth. So her invention is very important to our everyday lives today. And I was very fascinated with this book. I'm fascinated with Hedy Lamarr, and I just really wanted to get into this, and I could not. The author just did not give any emotional depth to the character. She didn't give any character to Hedy Lamarr. It was all just one-dimensional, and that was the reason why I DNF'd this one. And that makes me sad because I do have 2 other books on my physical TBR by this author that I was wanting to read, and now I'm kind of worried that the writing is going to be more of the same. But I'm not going to write the author off. I'm going to give those books a chance, but this one was not for me. Okay, I'm gonna put these, I'm gonna try and stack these over here. Hopefully they don't fall. But let's get to the 13 books that I did finish, starting with the very first book that I read in January, and that is This Time Next Year by Sophie Cousins. This is a romance that's set in the UK, and here we're following Minnie and Quinn, who were both born right after each other on New Year's Day. They were both New Year's Day babies, the very first babies born at this one hospital within seconds of each other. And throughout their lives, they've had a lot of misconnections, and during their 30th birthday, they both go to the same New Year's Eve party, and they connect there. I love the plot idea, and I love the independent character growth. These two were not rushing to get in a relationship with each other. They were trying to fix themselves and improve themselves before they got into a relationship, and I love that. And also, this was a very quick and light read. It's just a fluffy romance novel, and I did enjoy those things about it. Now, what I did not like was I did not feel the chemistry between these two characters. Also, Minnie has a very quirky character, and usually I do like quirky characters. I don't know what it is about bubbly personalities. I love that. But with this, Minnie just felt very one-dimensional. There wasn't any depth to her. Very similar to the other woman in the room. It was just all kind of stuff surface level with her character. And then finally, the pacing was off. It did get kind of slow and boring in parts, and so I kind of struggled with reading this book. Now, I did read 2 other books by this author last year. I read The Good Part as well as Is She Really Going Out With Him, which is her newest release this past year. And I love both of them. I think The Good Part I gave 5 stars, and Is She Really Going Out With Him I gave 4 stars. So I really enjoyed those books, and I would recommend those 2 books over this one. It's just not her best. The next book I read is The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and this is the first book in the YA mystery thriller series called The Naturals series. Here we're following Cassie, who is 17 years old, and she joins a group of other teens who are part of an FBI classified program that uses teens who have exceptional talents and abilities to crack infamous cold cases. And Cassie's special ability is she knows how to read people very, very well, which makes her an excellent profiler. So she ends up moving into this house with these other 17-year-olds, and each one of them has a special ability. Now, what I loved about this is because it's YA, it's super easy breezy to read, so I just flew right through it. I did really, really enjoy it. I loved meeting all the different kids and learning about their personalities, how they work together, and what their special ability is. And then I also loved the training and the testing that Cassie had to go through just to test where she's at as a profiler and her interactions with all these other people. This book was really kind of setting up the rest of the series just because you're learning all about the different characters and how they interact with each other. There is obviously a mystery that these kids are trying to solve that kind of hits close to home to Cassie, and I did love that. The only thing I did not like is I felt like the plot twist or the big reveal was a little far-fetched, but again, it is a YA book, so I guess that's to be expected a little bit. Overall, I really, really enjoyed this. I do want to continue with this series, and I gave it 4 stars. Next book I read is the YA fantasy romance called The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. This is book 1 of the Remnant Chronicles trilogy. That is very difficult to say. And this little trilogy is the one that I purchased because I heard you needed to read this first before you get into the Dance of Thieves duology that this author wrote. So that is why I got this one. So here you're following Princess Leia, who on the morning of her wedding to a prince she's never met before, she escapes the castle with the help of someone else at the castle, and she settles down in a small little village. And then unbeknownst to her, the prince that she's supposed to marry as well as a hired assassin are trying to track her down and find her. So that is what this book is about. What I love the most is that there is a little bit of a mystery in here. You do not, obviously you know who Princess Leia is, but you do not know who the prince is, and you do not know who the hired assassin is. So there's also a little bit of a love triangle, which I thought was very interesting. I love the writing in here. This is YA, but I felt like the writing was just a little bit of a step up from the typical YA fantasy writing. I felt like it had some rich world building that I truly appreciated. And then I also loved Leia as a character. She's kind of naive in the beginning, and then she kind of, as you spend more time with her and as she grows through the book, she becomes a lot more self-reliant, which I always love a good, strong female lead, and I love seeing a well-developed character arc. I gave this book 3 stars, and the reason why I gave it 3 stars is while I enjoyed the writing and everything else I mentioned, this book was incredibly slow. It was so slow. The pacing was just way off for me, and I felt like we needed to pick things up a little bit more to keep my attention. So that is why it was a 3-star read for me. I do want to continue with this series. I think I'm really going to enjoy it, and I felt like this was a good setup for the other 2 books, and I can't wait to get started on those. The next book I read is a romance called The Do-Over by Sharon M. Peterson. And this is about Percy, who on New Year's Eve, her boyfriend dumps her on a radio show for concert tickets. So she's having a very bad day. And Percy is kind of a people pleaser. She always tries to make people happy, and she decides this is the year to do something different. So with the help of her best friend, she decides to create a New Year's resolutions list of things that are highly achievable. For example, she's going to stop dating, she's going to stop trying to lose weight, she's not going to work so hard, and stop trying to please her mother. But while she's trying to complete some of these tasks, she inadvertently tells her family that she's dating her next door neighbor. And then when the neighbor finds out, he just kind of goes along with it just to help her out. I did love the fake dating trope in here, and I really enjoyed the romance. I thought this book was very wholesome, and just I thought the romance was so sweet. There is a ton of family drama. Percy's family is just, they're a chaotic mess. Her mom is awful to her. And Percy's one of these people, she's a people pleaser, and she just kind of bottles her emotions and what she wants inside until one day she blows up. And that's certainly the case in this book. Now, my struggle with this was actually on the rating. I enjoyed most of this book. I thought it was really sweet and wholesome and entertaining, and it was a quick read. I struggled with rating it. I did not get 4-star feels, or obviously not 5-star feels, but it also wasn't a 3-star book where it was just fine. So I think I settled on 3.5 stars, but I did downgrade it on Goodreads to 3 stars. This was a really cute book. I enjoyed it, and I would recommend it. Just know that this is just a book of escapism. You're not going to have any life-changing moments with it. It's just an entertaining book, and I enjoyed it for what it was. Next up is The Second Chance Year by Melissa Weisner. This is an adult romance. So this is about, so here we're following Sadie, who is trying to climb up the ranks of being a pastry chef, and she's just having a bad year. She gets dumped by her boyfriend, she loses her job, she gets kicked out of her apartment. Just this whole year has been just awful for her. And she ends up running into a fortune teller, and she makes a wish that she can redo this entire year over. She wakes up the next day, and boom, it's January 1st of the beginning of that year. During the course of this book, she is going through her life trying to make different choices so that she doesn't lose her boyfriend, so that she doesn't lose her job, and therefore losing her apartment. I settled on 2 stars for this book. I really struggled with the message of this book. This includes sexism in the workplace, which is very important. It also talks about sexual assault or sexual harassment in the workplace. And the main character is sexually harassed and assaulted multiple times. And she doesn't say anything. She just goes with it because her job is so important to her than speaking up for herself and staying up for herself. And that's what I didn't like about this book. It was a big part of this book. I feel like reading about these things are very important, but the execution of this was awful, and that is why I gave it 2 stars. I did like the little romance with Jacob in here. I thought he was really sweet. He was kind of that golden retriever type guy, and I love that. But overall, it was the execution of how the main character handled these situations that really bothered me. Also, her friendship with, what's her name? Kasumi, I think that's her name, is very toxic. I didn't like their friendship at all. So again, I gave this one 2 stars. It wasn't for me. I did not like the execution of how she handled those situations, and so sadly, this was a huge miss for me. The next book I read is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. This is an adult mystery thriller, and I actually thought that I read something else by this author, but I've never read anything by her. This is actually her debut novel, and I think she's had a few other books come out since then, but this is my first. So this is about Chloe, who 20 years ago, her father was convicted of murder. 6 teenagers disappeared, and he was convicted because of his involvement with that. And so now it's 20 years later. Chloe is grown. She is a psychiatrist, and she is just struggling in life. She has all kinds of problems. She's not in a great headspace. And at this point, more teenagers are starting to disappear, and bodies are found very similar to what happened 20 years ago. So it's kind of like, did her dad do it? Did he not? Is there a copycat killer? What's going on? That is really what this is about. and I enjoyed it, but overall this was very forgettable. I had to kind of flip through this book to help me remember what it was about and what the plot twist was, because I could not remember, and I read this just a few weeks ago. So overall this book was very forgettable to me. I did enjoy the writing, but I do remember that there were parts of it, again, that were very slow. There were some pacing issues. This is kind of like a slow burn mystery thriller, and I don't always love those. I need stuff to happen, and that is why I gave this one 3 stars. Not my favorite. I don't know that I would recommend it, but I would still give this author a chance and try some of her other books. The next book I read is In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. This is more of a general fiction. It does have a little bit of a subplot of a romance, but it's definitely more women's fiction or general fiction. So in this book, we're following Danny, who is a lawyer in New York City, and she falls asleep on her couch one night, and she wakes up and it's 5 years in the future, and she gets to live 1 hour in that future. And so when she wakes up an hour later, she's like, what the heck? That was a strange dream. So throughout the course of this book, you're following her as things start to happen that kind of correlate to where she's at in 5 years, because in that dream, or whenever she jumped ahead 5 years, she was not in her apartment. She was not, the man in her apartment was very different to the man that she's dating at the moment, who she thinks she's going to marry. So her life is very different, and everything she's experiencing leading up to that is kind of falling into place. And so she's obviously having a hard time with this, like, what's going on. So that is what this one is about. I loved this book so much. I gave it 4 stars. I cried so hard in this book. I mean, straight on ugly crying. This book went in a direction that I was not expecting. I thought it was going to be about one thing, and it just took me on a whole nother direction. Danny, the main character Danny, is very much a control freak, and as things are happening, she absolutely comes unraveled because she cannot control the things that she wants to control. I think if you are a control freak, if you are a type A and you need things in a certain way and to follow certain rules and things get out of whack, I loved following that journey of her, having her trying to deal with that and move through her life knowing that things aren't going to be how you expect them to be. I love the friendship in here. Danny's best friend is Bella. They've been friends since they were kids, and I loved reading about their friendships, and I loved reading about just, it's almost like a sisterhood. It's like they're sisters by heart, and it was so sweet, and I could not recommend this book enough. 4 stars. I think I originally gave it 5 stars, but I backtracked and said, no, it's more of a 4-star read, and I would stick with that. If you haven't read it, please do. I have read 2 other books by this author. I read Expiration Dates. Love that book so much. I cried in that one too. I know a lot of people didn't like it. I personally did. And then the other book she wrote was One Italian Summer. That one was a 2-star read for me. I did not enjoy that one. So if you're new to Rebecca Searle, I would say read this one and read Expiration Dates. Those are my 2 favorites so far. I feel like I have a ball on my head. All right, next up, I read my most favorite book of the month, and that is The Favorites by Lane Fargo. Oh my God. This book was so good. It's obviously my favorite book of the year so far because we're only in January, but I'm going to say it right now. This is going to be in my top 10 best of 2025, if not my top 5. This was so good. This one is a contemporary fiction, also a little bit of a sports romance, but my goodness, this book just ate my brain. It is so, oh man, it's so dramatic, so theatrical. There's so much messiness and relationships with this. I loved it. I loved it so much. So here we're following Katerina Shaw and Keith Rocha, and they have been training since they were children to be ice dancers in figure skating, and they are actually the next big thing. But they don't do things the easy way. They have not had an easy life. Keith is actually from a foster home. He is an orphan. Kat has had to really just fight and claw her way to get what she needs in order to get training to become an ice dancer. They are definitely not the rich people who are usually in figure skating. They are definitely the people on the other side of the tracks. This book is told a little bit through documentary style because a documentary is coming out 10 years after the 2014 Olympics, where something happened to where Kat and Heath never skated with each other again. That was their very last competition. We as readers don't know what happened, but every few chapters there is some interviews during this documentary that kind of set up those chapters. What I love most about this book, it is so full of drama. It really captured the obsession that Heath and Kat had with each other, as well as the messiness of their relationship. And then it also pulled back the curtain in the world of figure skating so that you can really see how cutthroat that sport can be and how competitive it is. Now, I grew up, I think I was in junior high or high school when the Tanya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan drama unfolded, and I just remember it captured the world. You could not buy a magazine without them on the cover. And then at the Olympics, it was just drama filled, watching these two just kind of ignore each other. So because of seeing all that play out on TV when I was a kid, I do remember seeing how competitive and how some figure skaters will go to extreme lengths to succeed. Also, Kat is a very incredibly strong female character, and I love that. She was really driven by her desires and her dreams, and she wanted to achieve those goals and to be the best at all costs. That is really what drove her throughout this book. This book just consumed my brain. I was obsessed with all the characters. I laughed, I cried. There was lots of twists and turns I was not expecting. Again, this is just a 6-star read for me. I love this so much. This book has been getting some buzz, and with good reason. I thought it was very well written, and again, it just consumed my mind. I could not put it down, and I've been recommending it to all my friends. If you haven't read this, please do. So good. Oh, also, after I finished this, a week later, the US Figure Skating Championship happened. Did I watch it? Specifically, did I watch ice dancing, which I never even knew existed? Yes, I did. So after I read that amazing book, I read a not so amazing book, and that was Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. I have never read anything by this author, but I do have 2 other books on my physical TBR, and this is her new release. It is a mystery thriller, and this one was not for me. I did not like this one at all. This is about an author named Grady, and he's on the phone with his wife one day getting some great news and relaying that to his wife. The book that he's written is becoming a New York Times bestseller. And as he's on the phone with her, she's driving and she sees someone laying in the road. She gets out to help that person, never to be seen again. Cut to a year later, and Grady is not doing okay. His wife is still missing. He can't focus on his writing, so he hasn't written anything. He doesn't have any money now, and he's just struggling. So I don't know if it's his editor or his literary agent, sends him to the small town because there is a cottage that another author used to write from and had a lot of success. It's isolated. It gives him time to really focus on his writing. And so she sends him there. This house is on an island that's very isolated. It's hard to get to. But when he gets there, he starts seeing who he thinks is his wife. The wife that's been missing for all this time. And so that's what this is about. I don't know, with this one, it was just dumb. I did not like it. It started off great, had a great idea, and it just went down from there. There were so many red flags on this island. First off, there's no communication. His cell phone doesn't work. There's no phones like landlines. He can't get off the island because he can't get the schedule of the ferry from anyone. Like, no one will tell him when the next ferry is so he can get off. And he just brushes those red flags off. Like, he's just very uninterested in it and detached from what's going on. And I really struggled with that. I did like the writing. I thought it was very atmospheric, which I heard Alice Feeney does write very atmospheric books, which I do personally enjoy. But this one was a big miss. I gave it 2 stars. I do want to read the other 2 books. I have Rock, Paper, Scissors and Daisy Darker, and I heard both of those are really good, so I do want to give those a chance. This one just didn't do it for me. All right, the next book I read was actually a reread, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I read this back in, I want to say May. Loved it. It was my very first fantasy romance in the adult genre that I've ever read, and it consumed me, and it took me on this fantasy romance journey that I am very thankful for. And did I like this just as much the second time around? Yes, I did. This is still a 5-star read. Loved everything about it. I'm not going to talk about it because I know you guys have heard about this. If you haven't, you can look it up. But this is book 1 in a 5-book series. And the 3rd book just came out, and I was wanting to reread this one as well as Iron Flame in preparation for Onyx Storm. I did not have time to get to Iron Flame before I read Onyx Storm, so I just read this one, and I still give it 5 stars. It was very, very good, which brings me to Onyx Storm. I don't have my physical copy because I have loaned it out to a friend, and that one, I'm in the minority. Don't get mad at me. Reading is subjective, but that one was a big miss for me. I did give it 3 stars because it's a Fourth Wing book. I feel like I can't give it anything less than 3 stars, but in that book, it just kind of picks up. I think it was 2 weeks after Iron Flame ended. I think if this was not a Fourth Wing book, I probably would have DNF'd it. I was so bored and so confused throughout that book. Rebecca Yarros really expands on the world building, and I found that kind of messy. She also introduces more side characters, and I felt like we had so many to begin with. My brain couldn't handle anymore, and I couldn't remember who was who. Obviously, I could follow who the main characters were. That kind of carried over from Fourth Wing and then from Iron Flame, like the main characters, not the side characters. I obviously knew who they were, but I really struggled trying to remember who some of the side characters were and some of the places and what happened there. So that is why I found it very confusing. There is, again, the world building was very messy. I had trouble with the relationship between Xaden and Violet. I'm at the point where I am bored with the relationship and I can care less if they're together or not, which is really sad because this is a fantasy romance. And if I'm not invested in the romance between these two, you've lost me. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I did feel like this was kind of a repeat of Iron Flame to some extent. Yes, we got some really crucial information that we've all been waiting for, and I was very happy to read about those things, but I felt like it was more of the same, and that's not what I wanted. I feel like this whole series probably could have been a trilogy. Like, they've expanded it too much to where we're getting a lot of fluff and filler information that's not moving the story along, in my opinion. I'm sure you guys feel very differently, but I feel like this was another filler book. And it was also very repetitive. I can't say too much, but things were happening over and over again. And it was interesting, but it was just kind of like a wash, rinse, repeat cycle. You know, it just I don't know. And then the ending of this book had me scratching my head, and I was like, wait, what just happened? I didn't love it. I gave it 3 stars. Personally, I think I liked Iron Flame more, and I did not love Iron Flame either, at least not the first half. I did enjoy the second half, but at this point, I don't care. I don't care about the characters. What I did love, I love the fight scenes. Rebecca Yarros knows how to write fight scenes. They're not too long, they're not too short, they're very interesting and they're captivating. I liked Violet's journey as a character. She's really grown into being a leader. And then I also loved reading more about Garrett and Riddick from the previous books. They are interesting characters. I do want to read more about them, but I'm bored with this series, and I feel like it really could have been a trilogy. So I'm sorry. It's a 3-star read. It wasn't that great. The next book I read is another YA mystery thriller, and it's a book I've been hearing here and there for the past year, and that is That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. I loved this book. I gave this one 4 stars. This one is about a girl who wakes up one night and she's in a ditch. She's obviously been hurt. Something's happened. She has bruises and contusions. She doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know why she's in this ditch. And the police find her and take her to the station. And while she's there, a man shows up. He's frantic. He's been looking for her and says he's her father. And he has proof. He has her birth certificate. He has a student ID. He has pictures. So the police release her to this man who says he's her father. And I'm going to tell you this blurb because it really sums it up. It says, he is her father, her name is Mary, or so he says. That is what this book is about. So with this book, I could not put it down. It was such a quick and gripping read. I was really invested in Mary and what she was going through and whether or not this man was her dad or if she was just a little cuckoo. What was going on. The ending completely took me by surprise. I did not see it coming. I thought it was going one direction and went somewhere completely different. It was definitely a punch in the face, and it was just a fantastic YA mystery thriller. But this one was absolutely well worth the hype. I gave it 4 stars. Oh my gosh, I'm losing my little stack over here. Oh. Okay, my books are kind of leaning over here. All right, the next book I read was a book that I kind of read on a whim. It is a Kindle Unlimited book, and that is Fragile Sanctuary by Catherine Cowles. I have been seeing this book at Target and at Barnes & Noble just because the cover is so beautiful. It has, I don't know if you can see that, but it has watercolor mountains, and it's just really pretty. I picked it up on a whim just because I was trying to find something a little bit light, I guess, because I read Fourth Wing, and then I read Onyx Storm, and then I read That's Not My Name. So I was wanting a romance, something just to cleanse my brain a little bit. and I thought this would do it, and it did. This is a romantic suspense, and I did actually used to read a lot of romantic suspense back in the day, like when I was in high school. And I used to read a lot of Sandra Brown and Linda Howard's. They were very popular when I was in high school. So I was not unfamiliar with the whole romantic suspense genre. So here we are following Rhodes and Anson. And Rhodes has moved back to the small town to renovate her childhood home. Something tragic happened and she lost her family, and she was raised by her best friend's mom. And in that family, there were other foster children. And she lived a very good life. Her best friend was more like a sister to her. And that's what I loved about this book, was that found family, that foster family. A lot of times you hear about foster kids and they just grew up in these horrific foster homes. That was not the case here for this little family. All of the foster kids grew up in this great home with a loving foster mom and other foster siblings who they all got along. And while they weren't siblings by blood, they were definitely siblings by heart. They were true brother and sister in their hearts. And so I did love that. So really this is about her renovating this home and some weird things that are happening because of that. Here we're also following Anson, who is her foster brother's best friend, who also works at her foster brother's construction company. He is very knowledgeable in, I don't want to say what it is, but he's very knowledgeable in this one little aspect of construction. So he is kind of like the foreman on this job. So it's brother's best friend, a little bit of forced proximity because he's always there, and it's a small town romance. Now, Anson also has had some trauma in his background, and so really you're just following Anson and Rhodes as they come together and help each other heal. And this was so good. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. The writing was great. I felt like the pacing was on par. I did not get the 5-star feels, but the romance in here was, oh man, the romance was so good. I really felt their connection. I really felt that emotional draw that they had, and I just thought they were incredible together. I think the main reason why I didn't get 5 stars is I thought that the kind of the plot twist and the whole suspenseful part was a little, I don't know, it was a little goofy and silly, but overall, I really enjoyed this book. This is book 1 of a series. I do have the second book, and I hope to read that here in February. But in this series, every foster brother and sister are going to get their own book. So that's how this whole series is going to interconnect. And I love that because I felt like this book did introduce us to all the foster brothers and sisters. And I really liked each and every one of them, and I want to read more about them. And obviously, because they're foster kids, they come from traumatic pasts, and I want to know more about them. Love this. I gave it 4 stars. I'm absolutely going to continue with this entire series. All right, my friends, these are all the books that I read in January. If you have read any of these books, please let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of my opinions. Also in the comments, please let me know what you read in January. Let me know what your top books were. My favorite book of the month, obviously, is the favorites. If you can only read one book out of this stack this month, I would say read the favorites. It was really, really good. But yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And also hit that little bell notification so that you don't miss out on future videos. If you're like me and you don't always like to comment, leave me a little butterfly emoji and let me know that you stayed here until the end. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.